Hello, and thank you for joining us here in On Israel podcast from Tel Aviv. This is Ben Caspit. As Mark Twain said when his obituary was published prematurely, reports of the Labour Party's demise have been somewhat exaggerated, at least for now. The party, whose founders established and ran the State of Israel for its first 30 years, had dropped in the polls to the point where it was no longer considered electable. Support for the once unchallenged party had been eroding for years. What little credit it had was wiped out by the decision of its former leader, Amir Peretz, to join the Netanyahu government last year, and by the betrayal of Knesset member Orly Levy Abekassis, who ran on the Labour ticket but crossed the lines to the Likud. Against all odds, with fresh new parties popping up all over the place, the old lady of Israeli politics was suddenly back, revived by feminist maverick named Merav Michaeli. She rejected the "do not resuscitate" order issued by the public and all analysts, and was chosen party leader. According to the latest polls, Labour is now back in the game with a solid fighting chance in the upcoming March 23 elections. A handful of smaller parties that emerged in recent months, some hoping to feed off Labour's remains, has crashed even before takeoff. One of Labour's newest faces is Rabbi Gilad Kariv, fifth on the Knesset list. He stands a real chance of being elected, which would make him the first Reform rabbi to serve in the Israeli parliament. While the Reform movement in the United States is the largest Jewish denomination, the Reform community in Israel is not recognized by its Orthodox establishment and generally keeps a low profile. Kariv is one of its most public faces, and his clashes with Orthodox representatives have provided fodder for the media. That arena could now move to the Knesset, with the eyes of Jews around the world turning to watch events that may shape the future of the Jewish religion. Kariv is an Israeli-born lawyer, and along with his rabbinical work, he has served as an articulate social and political activist. We will talk with him about Labour's prospects, about his plans if he elected, about the incredibly complex intermingling of religion and state in Israel, and about the deep crisis triggered by the coronavirus epidemic with a large ultra-Orthodox community that refused to play by the rules and expose its true status as a state within a state. Rabbi Kariv will join us right after this short break.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading El Monitor. El Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. El Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives, and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at elmonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon El Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our El Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, On Israel with Ben Caspit, and On the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Now we are happy to say shalom to Rabbi Gilad Kariv, Executive Director of the Israel Movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism, and a candidate for the 24th Knesset. Thanks for joining our Own Israel podcast, Rabbi Kariv. Shalom, Gilad.
Shalom, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, let's start with I think the obvious question. I follow you for a long time now, and when Labour was at the top of its game, you ran in party primaries but never came in high enough to get into the Knesset. Ironically, could that change now that the party has almost been written off?
So you're right. It's not my first primaries and not my first attempt to be elected to the Knesset through the Labour Party. The truth must be said that in my recent campaigns, I succeeded to gain a lot of support, but because of the structure or the traditional structure of the Labour Party, I was pushed back in order to enable representatives of different sectors, like the kibbutzim movement, to be in the list in more realistic slots. This time, because the party is working hard to save itself and to maintain its political strength, the structure of the list was changed. And in a way, I think that I succeeded to realize this time my actual political strength in the party, because the party knew it has to renew its list.
You could make history by becoming Reform Jury's first Knesset rabbi representative. Are you concerned about, for example, the clashes that are likely to happen with the 15 or 16 Knesset members of the ultra-Orthodox parties?
So first, I must say that I will not be the first MK that is a member of the Reform movement in Israel. We had at least one Knesset member that represented the Independent Liberal Party that was the late chair of the Reform movement. But you are right that I will be the first Reform rabbi and a person that is first and foremost identified with progressive Judaism, the non-Orthodox streams. Now, if I'm afraid, no, because I think that the reason almost 10,000 people, members of the Labour Party, voted for me was because they wanted someone to present an alternative voice to the Jewish perspective of the ultra-Orthodox parties and Knesset members. I don't want to say that I'm looking forward to have clashes with the ultra-Orthodox MKs, but this is exactly what I did in the last 20 years, and I'm planning to continue my work in the Knesset to present a progressive Jewish Zionist voice. I need to say that although I expect, how to say, rough comments from the ultra-Orthodox Knesset members, I have enough experience in order to know that when you shut down the cameras and the microphones, it's a totally different dialogue. I think that today the vast majority of Israelis understand we need to redesign the relations between the ultra-Orthodox community and the state.
This is exactly my next question to you. I want to dive into the details, but before this, so if you bump into a Aryeh Deri or a Moshe Gafni in the Knesset without cameras and microphones and nosy journalists like myself, can you start a dialogue with them? And intimate?
So let's start by saying what is of course obvious, because this is part of my religious and civil political philosophy. I didn't boycott any stream of Judaism, including the ultra-Orthodox community. It's the political leaders of the ultra-Orthodox community that publicly boycotting us. Now, let's go back to the negotiations we had around the Western Wall Agreement, that there was an ongoing dialogue with the leadership of the ultra-Orthodox parties. They were part of the agreement. Avichai Mandelblit, that back then was the secretary of the government, brought to them the results of each and every negotiation meetings we had with the Prime Minister team. 30 minutes before the Kotel agreement was approved by the government, I received a call from the government secretary back then saying to me that Aryeh Deri wants us to change a specific word in the government resolution. The dialogue went into this level of details, unfortunately.
And the government approved the decision and the resolution, and whatever happened later, we all know. They just heard their base and their press. I'm talking about the ultra-Orthodox, and they just regretted the whole thing.
Yes, and I must say it's not only about the ultra-Orthodox politicians; it's also about the Prime Minister, because I think that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, that was deeply involved in the negotiations, showed not for the first time and not for the last time that he doesn't know how to deal with public or political pressure, and instead of understanding its role in pushing the ultra-Orthodox leaders to be pragmatic, actually by not standing firm with the agreement, he enabled this situation that the Haredi press or the more extreme forces in the ultra-Orthodox community forced the ultra-Orthodox politicians to climb on a very high tree. And this is, for me, another sad example of how the current government and the current prime minister, instead of facing the extreme players in the political field in Israel, is actually backing the more extreme forces and neglecting his duty to protect the Israeli center. And I'm saying it because in the end, we need to understand that the ability to build a new paradigm of relations between the ultra-Orthodox community and the Israeli state, or the concept of Israeli statehood, depends on the ability of the leaders of the Israeli government.
And
on the one hand, not to incite.
You were talking about politics, but it's also not only political reasons. It's a lot more complicated than this. It's also the personal survival of the prime minister that needs all the 15 or 16 hands comparing to your one vote, if you'll be a Knesset member, in order, to try and escape his trial, etc. Mm-hmm. But I want to ask you, how do you view the crisis of governance exposed by COVID-19, which highlighted the ultra-Orthodox community's rejection of state authority and its consequences for the rest of society, as reflected in the extensive morbidity of their communities? Do you think a dialogue and compromise are possible?
So, with your permission, one comment in regard to the Prime Minister, and then I'll go back to the ultra-Orthodox community. I fully agree with you that in recent years, the interests of the Israeli society as a whole are hijacked by the personal interests of the Prime Minister and his attempt to escape the criminal bottom line of the legal procedures against him. Yet, I need to say, and this is part of my experience with the Israeli government, that it's not only about his personal escape from the legal procedures, is also, or this current crisis shows something that people that are involved in the governance of the state of Israel know for a long time, is a very bad manager. And there is a huge gap between the public image of Prime Minister Netanyahu and its actual abilities to lead complicated situations. And in that regard, I think that what we see today during the pandemic is not only about his personal interests. It's also about the basic failure of him as a political leader and as a manager of the Israeli executive branch. Now going back to the ultra-Orthodox community. Look, I look at the signs in the streets of different parties like Israel Beitenu, led by Avigdor Lieberman, who is basing its entire campaign on a clear agenda against the ultra-Orthodox community. But I know that basically this party is working together with the ultra-Orthodox parties. I was personally involved only 2 months ago in the political negotiations in the national institutions, the World Zionist Organization, the Jewish National Fund, the Jewish Agency. And it is quite clear that right now the right wing is controlling those institutions because Israel Beitenu worked together with Shas. This was the same story in the Jerusalem municipal elections. Yes. Instead of having a more central mayor in Jerusalem, Israel Beitenu and Shas elected together the current mayor. Now, why I'm saying that? Because I want to make a clear difference between campaigning against the ultra-Orthodox community and having a strong political and ideological philosophy that demands the ultra-Orthodox community to take the responsibility of statehood, but at the same time is not trying to incite against this community. And I think that in that regard, what we need is a strong leadership that understand the need to change the nature of relations with the ultra-Orthodox community, understand it cannot be done through slogans, but at the same time, it cannot be done also by enabling the political and rabbinical leadership of this community to ignore the responsibilities of being part of a modern country. And I strongly believe that identifying the right balance between carrots and sticks can work here. I think there is an internal desire of many ultra-Orthodox Israelis to see this change. I strongly believe that if we think in a creative and smart way, the things can be done. One good example is the fact that the government is totally neglecting its legal duty to develop a public school system for the Haredi community. Right now, the only sector in the Israeli society that doesn't have a public school system is the ultra-Orthodox community, because the ultra-Orthodox parties always demanded to have their own educational system.
But Rabbi Kariv, it looks like a clash of civilization. You know very well how complicated are the issues if we're talking about religion and state, if we're talking about the Orthodox community rejection of compulsory military service, a low job market participation, and many politicians in the past who tried to get them to toe the line have failed. What do you see as your greatest challenge as a lawmaker? Will you challenge the monopoly of the Orthodox on such issues as conversion and their attitude toward the reform and conservative congregations in the United States?
Look, it is clear that aside to redesign the relations with the ultra-Orthodox communities, and I agree with you, it's a very sensitive and complicated task, but I think it can be done step by step. Another a clear or strategic issue that I want to deal with is the issue of promoting religious pluralism in Israel, Jewish diversity and freedom of religion and conscience. And here I think it's important to understand that there is a market failure in the Israeli democracy, because it is quite clear that there is a strong majority among all Israelis to have, for example, civil marriage and divorce track. It is quite clear that most Israelis support having public transportation on Shabbat. It is quite clear that the vast majority of Israelis don't want to have a monopoly of the Orthodox chief rabbinate over the issue of kashrut. And this is, I think, the only political arena in which we see this market failure, that the Israeli majority cannot realize its desire. And I think there is today an opportunity to identify the few strategic things that must be done in this arena. I'm not saying it will be easy, but I think that we might have a strategic opportunity to push some kind of civil marriage track in Israel. We have an opportunity, together with many municipal leaders in Israel, mayors and municipal politicians, to bring some solutions to the issue of Shabbat in the public Israeli sphere, including public transportation. And I think it will have a massive support in the Israeli audience. It is clear that if the Knesset members would have voted according to their political philosophy in the interests of their own crowds, we would have been in a different situation. I'm definitely planning to push this forward. You mentioned the relations with the North American Jewish community or with world Jewry as all. Definitely, Prime Minister Netanyahu betrayed its Zionist duty to cultivate strong relations with all Jewish streams. I'm using rough words, but I think this is exactly what happened in recent years. Part of his strange and unwise alliance with the most extreme right-wing Christian forces in the US, with the evangelists, was actually to push back the progressive Jewish community, which is the vast majority of North American Jewry. And here I think that the next government, and I hope Prime Minister Netanyahu will not lead it, will have to invest a lot in rebuilding the trust between Jewish diaspora and the state of Israel. I need to say that today it has also an effect on the relations of the Israeli government with the American administration, and I think we don't need to explore in depth the challenge that right now we have with the administration in Washington, D.C., which is by far, if I can say, the most Jewish administration we ever had in D.C. It is clear that our current prime minister is not the right person to rebuild the trust with DC, and it has. I will suggest that the relations between the Israeli government and the non-Orthodox streams in North America have some impact also on this issue. So yes, it's becoming to be a strategic thing.
You've just answered, Rabbi Kariv, a very important question that I wanted to ask, but I want to follow up on it because it's such an important issue. I heard personally from many Israeli diplomats in North America that Prime Minister Netanyahu has actually written off the American Reform and Conservative Judaism, although they still exist in his words. They are now moving on a plateau, and right ahead waits for them. I think they're going to fall and disappear because of the intermarriage that is the rate between Jews and non-Jews that is sky high among Reform and Conservative Jews. So he prefers to count on the Orthodox and the Christian evangelists. And I wanted to ask, how do you feel about it?
So let me first reply as a leader of the reform movement in Israel and around the world. You know, for 250 years, leaders of other Jewish communities suggest that we are about to disappear in one generation, and meanwhile we became to be the largest Jewish denomination in Jewish life today. I'm not suggesting as a Reform rabbi that we don't have a challenge of Jewish continuity, but I know the numbers, and this challenge belongs to all Jewish communities around the world, including those that enjoy, if we can say, Orthodox dominance. We strongly believe that we need to work very hard in order to secure the Jewish future. And we strongly believe that the only relevant answer is to adopt an inclusive approach. Now, in regard to the Prime Minister, allow me to suggest that the Prime Minister didn't become suddenly to be a Jewish philosopher or an expert of Jewish demography. Prime Minister Netanyahu for years understood the importance of maintaining strong relations with all Jewish communities, especially in North America. What happened was that he discovered that the Reform community and also the conservative community are not willing to align with him on all subjects. And instead of having a political ability to adopt a more complicated approach to understand that sometimes you can build alliances with communities and individuals that you don't that do not share all your beliefs. Prime Minister Netanyahu chose to do what Prime Minister Netanyahu always does, and that's to push back his opponents, to incite against them, to mark them as not loyal to the state of Israel. And that's exactly what he did with the progressive Jewish community in North America. It wasn't about any strategic analysis of the Jewish future in North America, because, you know, the current political reality in DC shows how important it is to the Israeli governments to maintain a bipartisan political approach, and also to maintain a bipartisan approach towards the Jewish community, and not relying on the relations with one denomination, which is in the end the minority group in North America. I strongly believe that the relations between the State of Israel and the progressive Jewish community in North America are strong. I'm not saying we don't have challenges with the non-Zionist, post-Zionist margins, but I still think that when you enter all Reform and conservative synagogues in North America, you see the flag of Israel on the bima, and you can find the prayers for Israel Independence Day in the progressive egalitarian Sidurim prayer books in North America. But in order to protect those relations, we need to change the hard disk in Jerusalem, and we need to regain the trust of those liberal egalitarian communities. And now I'm speaking as a Labour candidate, it is quite clear that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not the right person to recover the relations with the Democratic administration, and he is not the right person to recover the relations with millions of Reform and conservative Jews.
But to wrap up this issue and our conversation as a whole, you're talking as we are going to see a lefty administration in Israel, but you know that the people in Israel moved significantly to the right. We were going to have between 70 or 80 rightist Knesset members in the next Knesset. It's not that it's, you know, it's possible now to elect a lefty prime minister in Israel, and the prime minister's people and supporters, they are even not counting whatever you said before about the nominations. There's so many Jews that we see in President Biden's administration. You know, they're trying to divide the Jews into groups. there are good Jews and bad Jews, and those Jews you're talking about are post-Zionist and leftist, and they're not from our own. And this is, so in my opinion, very dangerous.
Look, first of all, I think, and you know it more than I, if we check the political biography and the records of the American Jews who are involved today in the administration, the vast majority of them are devoted Jews and real lovers of Israel.
Including Biden, by the way, is not Jew, but he defined himself as a Zionist.
Of course, look, the number of Passover seders that will be held in houses of cabinet members and in the White House is unprecedented. And we know that both the president himself and the vice president, Kamala Harris, are involved with Jewish family life, and many cabinet members, and the vast majority of them have a strong record of supporting the state of Israel. Now, here I want, and I fully agree with you, that it's not that the next government in Israel is going to be a central-left government. I do think that we have a real opportunity to have a unity government, which is a true unity government, and not what we saw in the last 9 months. And I'm not putting aside the possibility that, at least for part of the term, we'll have a prime minister who is coming from the ranks of the central, modest left circle in Israel. But going back to what you said, there is a huge difference between the political attitude of people like Gideon Sa'ar and even Naftali Bennett towards the issue of Jewish diversity when you compare it to the attitude of Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I want to say it out loud. It's not that I'm supporting the policies of Gideon Sa'ar's party, or especially not Naftali Bennett's political philosophy. I strongly believe we need to work hard to separate ourselves from the Palestinians, or vice versa, or the other way around. But take, for example, the future Knesset member Dani Dayan, that was a former consul general in New York. And it is clear that he is totally identified with the settlement movement. And I can tell you from my personal experience, Dani Dayan saw as his most important task to have a dialogue with the liberal community in North America. I think that one of the reasons is today not in the Likud, but in Gideon Sa'ar party, is because he understands the damage that the prime minister, with his aggressive attitude.
I know it personally, and he was our guest here 2 weeks ago, and we were having exactly this issue in our conversation. Anyway, Rabbi Gilad Kariv, it was a very important conversation. I thank you very much for joining us here in On Israel podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with some final thoughts after this break. Thank you, and shalom, Rabbi Kariv.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you.
I'm Andrew Parasolidi, president of the award-winning media news site El Monitor, where we cover the Middle East with some of the best reporters and columnists anywhere. And I'm excited to announce our new podcast, On the Middle East, where each week I will interview newsmakers from the U.S. and the region about the latest news and trends, with additional commentary from our on-the-ground correspondents. Those of you who follow the region know that what happens in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East. And to cite another great movie line, every time the U.S. tries to get out, the region pulls us back. Your time is valuable, so let me promise you this. You will learn something, and you will never be bored, because each week we'll be talking with and listening to those leaders who are making the news and shaping the trends in this critical and fascinating region. So please subscribe to On the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Thank you for staying with us. Rabbi Gilad Kariv will probably be the first Reform rabbi in the Israeli parliament. He's excited, he's proud, and he's looking forward to the conflicts and clashes that he will probably face with 15 to 16 ultra-Orthodox Knesset members. It will be very interesting. The interesting part of the talk was when we reached the very complicated and maybe disastrous relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and parts of the Israeli right and the progressive Jews in the United States of America. Rabbi Kariv denied the allegations or the prophecy that the Reform and conservative Jews in the United States are going to vanish. He's saying that for 250 years, leaders of Jewish communities all around were saying that this Jewry in the United States is about to disappear. But in the meanwhile, he says, we became the largest Jewish community and the largest power in Jewish life in America. We face a challenge, he admits, because of the very high rate of intermarriage between Jews and non-Jews, but this challenge is being faced by all the Jewish communities around the world, not only in the United States, including Jewish community with a very Orthodox dominance. So it's not only our story in the United States of America, and I'm a Reform rabbi. I know the numbers. We are dealing with it, and I'm optimistic. About Prime Minister Netanyahu, he was a lot less optimistic. He used the very harsh words. He said that PM Netanyahu betrayed the American Jews. Instead of trying to bridge the gap, the political gap, and find a common formula in order to maintain the partnership between Israel and the American Jews, he just wrote them off the map. He is inciting against them. He marks them as not loyal to the state of Israel, and it's a very, very bad and harsh mistake to Rabbi Kariv's words. He says that Prime Minister Netanyahu is a leader of the past. He is not the right man to heal the wound between Israeli Jews and their brothers and sisters in the United States, and also not the right man to heal the wound between Israel and the Democratic Party. So he really expects that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be ousted from his office after this election, although we still don't know if it's possible. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next Monday here in On Israel in Al Monitor. I'm Ben Caspit. Take care.
Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether your mom is into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried-and-true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now, everything at Movement is up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale. A watch is a gift that celebrates all the time you spent with mom. And a Movement watch is even more than that. Movement uses industry-leading materials for their fresh modern watch designs, from technically complex ceramics to vintage-inspired style. All for an incredible value your wrist and wallet will both love. And with one-size-fits-all convenience and fast free shipping and returns, it's a stress-free shopping experience. Save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with Movement. Get up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale at mvmt.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at mvmt.com.